Okay. So welcome. My name is Andrea Stultz, and I'm the Executive Director of LIFT. And I am here today with my friends Shoshana Hershkowitz from Citizen Action New York and Laura Romanoff from Families Together New York State. We are presenting tonight a presentation on sharing your story. This is an exercise that we hope will be helpful to parents who have to share their story at some point with a decision maker. We've framed most of the conversation tonight around the idea of presenting your narrative to a legislator. For instance, in trying to engage with a legislator during an advocacy event. But this is information that's also very useful if you are trying to speak to any professional. You know, everybody's got a limited amount of time. And so having a mental script that you can pull on when you need something from someone so that you can explain things effectively, it's a skill, and it doesn't always come naturally to everybody. So we want to help people out with that. So welcome. What are we here to do? We're here to help families create a personal story narrative that they can use when advocating for themselves or others. And as I mentioned, we'll be centering the conversation on sharing your story with policymakers. But these strategies can also be used when speaking to educators, doctors, clinicians, etc. A little bit more about who we are. I'm the executive director of Long Island Families Together. I'm an advocate for families so that we can all ask for improvements to the behavioral health system for children in New York State. I'd like to ask the other two speakers to introduce themselves now before we move on.
So, hi, my name is Laura Romanoff, and I am the Senior Regional Youth Partner with Families Together in New York State. I'm a certified youth peer advocate, and I also advocate for systems improvement.
I'm Shoshana Hershkowitz. I'm the statewide organizer for education and childcare at Citizen Action of New York, and I'm also a teacher.
So thank you. We want to, before we begin with the exercise of creating your narrative, I just wanted to provide some background information that can be useful. Basically, why are we doing what we're doing now? So each year from January to June, our state legislature meets in Albany to discuss the budget and pass laws. In early January, that is when the legislature convenes. In mid-January, you'll see the consideration of bills beginning. You'll also see mention of the governor's State of the State address. That's where she puts out her ideas for what she wants. The conversation, she's trying to steer the conversation into the directions that she wants. And the thing is that the way that New York works, you know, I had it explained to me. We've all seen the, you know, in childhood, we saw the Schoolhouse Rock video of "I'm Just a Bill," and it talked about, you know, at the federal level, had to pass the, you know, through the two houses of Congress, and then it gets signed into law. In New York State, things are a little bit different. A lot of the decision making is driven by the budget. The committees are not the place where a lot of decision making happens. So that State of the State is a precursor to the budget, which then gets presented right about now. February 1st is the final day for submission of the executive budget. Then you see in early March, Senate and Assembly budget changes are typically finalized. April 1st, the budget is finalized for good, and it's the beginning of the state fiscal year. And then the end of June, our legislators come back to their home districts. So right now is the time when we can be having conversations with our legislators in order to impress upon them what our priorities are as their constituents. And then they can bring those stories that they're hearing from us to their decisions about how the budget will look. So with regard to just some more background, these are some pointers that we like to tell people if they are visiting a legislator. These are good whenever you have an appointment with anybody who's going to be making a decision for you. Arrive early, dress neatly. You don't have to wear a suit, but be neat. With regard to a legislative visit, they can run from 15 to 45 minutes generally. And it's not unusual for either the meeting to actually take place with a staffer, or even if a legislator begins to speak with you, it's not unusual for them to have to hand off that meeting to a staffer so that they can vote or attend a committee meeting. So there's no disrespect in that. The staffer will communicate what happens in your session back to the legislator. In the case of the LIFT Family Empowerment Day that's happening March 21st in Albany, we will be in groups where there will be one person who will discuss overarching policy items that we'd like the legislator to consider. And then we will be asking the other people in the group to support our policy items with their own personal experience. And then always, whenever you are talking with a legislator, you want to make sure at the end that you don't just share your story, you link it to an ask. You want them to commit to something at the end of your narrative. And that can be as simple as, will you commit fully to funding children's behavioral health services? But we can also talk a little bit about some other priorities that have been put forward by child serving agencies. So I compiled a list, and I'm not going to read all of these, but I compiled a list from Families Together in New York State, and also a list of legislative priorities from Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids. And these are just some of the phrases you may hear if you attend a legislative advocacy day with us this year. And they fall under different catchments. So for instance, and you'll see a lot of crossover. So for Families Together in New York State, one of their core tenets is promote safe and supportive schools, since this is the environment where our children spend the majority of their days. And from that, they have some goals. Pass the Solutions Not Suspensions Act, fund school-based mental health programs, develop multiple pathways to a high school diploma. We're also at Families Together asking that legislators acknowledge and address the fact that there is a children's behavioral health crisis right now. It's difficult to access the services our children need. So we want to provide all children and youth and their families with timely, affordable access to appropriate behavioral health services within their communities, regardless of insurance status. And so you can see in the accompanying text that there are some details that we're asking for. These are evolving legislative priorities because they came out before the actual initial budget was released. So you can come back to LIFT and we will provide you with updated priorities as we analyze what the budget is this year. So then from Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids, they came at their priorities from the sense of addressing service gaps across the children's behavioral health continuum of care. They requested opening of beds in that were closed. They requested residential treatment facility beds. They wanted to bring bed levels back to 2014 in all regions of New York State. They want an acknowledgement that mental and behavioral health impacts the entire family. And so the entire family may need support and treatment when one family member is identified. Change legislation to ensure that commercial insurance companies, Medicare and Medicaid, have reimbursement rates that are commensurate with the state and regional standard cost. We are experiencing a tremendous workforce crisis right now in New York State in the caregiving fields, and it is because reimbursement rates have not kept up with cost of living. In that thread, increase the network of behavioral health providers so that desperate families aren't waiting for weeks or even months to access care for their children. We are asking to address the long wait lists. Children and families have requested more BIPOC and bilingual providers so that they are understood culturally when they go to receive support and treatment, and increase funding and support for youth and family peer advocates in all settings. Ensure all New York schools are supportive environments where students have access to the mental health supports they need. These can include things like wraparound funding to school-based mental health clinics, increasing the availability of restorative practices, crisis intervention training, family peer advocates. We also want students to understand their own mental health, and we believe that it's important that that be as part of the curriculum in the schools. And we want to ensure that all educators are receiving mental health training, for instance, mental health first aid, so that they have an understanding of students that may show up in their classroom with mental health diagnoses. So these are some of the priorities that we have. I'm trying to just give you a taste without spending too much time on them, because we want you to use your narrative and we want you to have your own priorities that you are wanting to share with legislators. But these can give you some touch-off points. You can hear, school-based mental health clinic and relate it perhaps to, your personal experience, or, the power of credentialed parent advocates, relate that to your experience. That's why I provided you with a little bit of background on that, but the important thing is for you to be pulling on your experience, and we can then help you link to some of the overarching ideas that we've talked about here. So I'm going to hand it off now to Laura, and she will talk about, she will cover the next couple slides for us.
So hi again, everybody. When you're sharing your story, it's important to recognize that part of your story is trauma, and it can bring up these negative feelings. So it's really important that you prioritize self-care when you are sharing your stories, and remember that you're in control of your narrative, and what you want to share is your choice. Make sure that it's all about what you want and what you want to express, and it's not about what somebody else is asking you to express. Stick to the level of detail that you are comfortable with. So if you need to practice with a family member, if you work in advocacy or mental health, maybe practicing with a co-worker or a trusted friend, That can get you comfortable with what kind of language you want to use and how much you want to share. And a really helpful strategy is the red light, yellow light, green light strategy, where each color depicts a zone of a part of your story. So for example, a red light zone would be something that's super personal. For example, maybe sharing like a specific trauma that you dealt with and you don't want to share that exact detail. That would be a red light. A yellow light would be explaining how this trauma can affect other people and just making a blanket statement like that. And a green light is something as simple as like saying your name or what you do for your job. And part of sharing your story is also knowing your audience. So how you share your story with the legislator is going to be a little different than how you share your story with a coworker. So understanding those differences is also really important. And a few more key points is that sharing your story can be nerve-wracking and bring up these emotions. So working with your nerves when they come up is going to be really helpful. Practicing is how you can start to understand yourself and your process on how you share your story. Finding some self-help ways on how you calm down, maybe taking a deep breath and grounding yourself before sharing your story, and taking the time out afterwards to recenter yourself once you have shared your story is super important. Understanding that when you share your story, some things might bring up feelings of fear. So understanding that fear activates your fight or flight system and speeds up how you tell your story and speeds up your nervous system might change how you express it, and it might not be the exact way that you're intending on doing it. So having those coping skills to get back to the main point of your story and what you want to express is part of your self-care. Practicing your narrative will reduce your nervousness, your anxiety, and we are having a follow-up webinar in March, so that'll be right before Family Empowerment Day, or Legislative Action Day, when we go up to the state capitol. And the whole purpose of sharing your story isn't to be perfect. It's not supposed to make your story lesser than how it actually was. You want to make sure that you're telling the parts of your story that get what you want the greater result to be, and what you want the policymakers and the legislators to do because of your story. So this is a Native American proverb, and it goes, "Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe, but tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever." So sharing your stories to legislators is going to motivate them to want to pass these policies that are going to affect the systems that we all exist in, whether it's you personally or your children or your families. Um, Having statistics to back up your story is fantastic, but making it personal will activate that emotional part of them that'll make them want to change what's not working.
So I'm going to hand it over now to Shoshana, and she can take us through an exercise that we'll do to come up with our narrative.
Thank you. And again, I want to reiterate and like affirm what Laura is saying, that the storytelling is so important. I know that when we talk to legislators, we'll often leave what's called a one-pager, a leave behind, that has all the facts and figures and data, and they sit with that. But the stories really do matter. And I really do believe that changing hearts and minds can lead to changing policy. Because when people relate to it, when it draws upon maybe even something in their own lives, it allows us to really reshape thinking. So the good news is it's tricky because telling your personal story is a lot, right? It can take a lot out of you, can be traumatic, just like Laura said. But I think that when we structure it, it takes some of the fear out. It gives us the opportunity. There are some safety nets when we can say, I'm going to do A, B, C. And then the structure can provide a little bit of an antidote to that fight or flight feeling. So it's serious business, but you can treat it kind of like Mad Libs, right? There's just a hello, I am, you put your name in, I live in, you name where you are. And then you tell them what your role is. You know, I'm an educator, I'm a mom, I'm who you're advocating for. And then you can talk about your experience of how you've navigated this system. And then you say, I'm here today because I want this one thing. And then story details from your own story that support why you're asking for the thing you're asking for. And then you end with, before I leave, I'd like to know, will you commit to this? Will you do this? Can you support this? And then you thank them for their time. So I'm going to go to the next screen. There we go. And here's my Mad Libs. I'm going to read it to you. And one of the things I think a lot about is if I've got limited time. If I'm talking to a legislator, there's a bunch of people in the room. If they're only giving me 15 minutes, I have to make it really succinct. Or if I'm speaking like in a public hearing, usually you have 3 minutes. So I think really hard about, okay, in a really limited amount of time, how can I get as much in of this story as possible? So I'm going to read you my pitch, my story, my Mad Libs. Hello, I'm Shoshana Hershkowitz, and I live in Setauket, New York. I'm an educator with over 2 decades of experience, and I have a great deal of navigating the education system. I'm here today because I've seen how schools do not use effective discipline, particularly on students of color, LGBTQ+ students, students with disabilities, and children with behavioral challenges. In the decade that I taught high school in Suffolk County, I served as a dean of discipline. I recall 2 examples that stay with me to this day. I dealt with a student who had been caught smoking on campus. The code of conduct required that I give him detention. When he didn't attend the detention, I was required to give him 3 detentions. When he didn't attend those detentions, he was given in-school suspension. None of this addressed the root cause of the problem, the nicotine addiction. And I contrast that with another incident with a student with developmental disabilities. He had touched another student inappropriately and came into the office with the school psychologist. The psychologist asked that I find an alternative to detention, and together we worked to have the student recognize his mistake, create a plan to address the harm with the other student, and create a behavior plan. This addressed the root cause of the problem while still holding the student accountable without punitive punishment. And this is what every student deserves, an opportunity to learn and grow from their mistakes. I'm here today asking that you support the Solutions Not Suspensions Act, which will do just that. Thank you for your time, right? So that's kind of short and sweet and gives me time to breathe if I'm feeling nervous, gives me time to move away from the script. It's a blueprint, but it's not the Bible, right? Like you can riff off of it, but it just gives you that like real basis. That way, if you're feeling anxious, you've got some wiggle room. So what I do want to do is within our chat, I'm going to drop the link for us to work on this together. This is just except I just did the wrong thing. Give me 30 seconds. Oh, there it is. Okay, but I'm going to drop the link in the chat so you have it. Give me 1 second to make sure we have this. I thought I had it and then I clicked on the wrong thing. There it is. Okay. So you can, if you click on this link, you can go into the Jamboard yourself. Everyone has editing access. And this just gives us a chance to address some of the questions that we might have to fill in the parts of our story. Like we know our name, we know our roles, but really drilling down into those asks. So the first question I have for you is drilling down, what is the one point you want lawmakers to take away from your story? And what I did here was, let me share my screen for a minute just so you can see how this will stop others. No, we're not gonna do that. Okay. What I did is, if you look right here, there's this thing is called the sticky note. If you click on that, it allows you to then create a little sticky note. You have like lots of colors, and then you can plug in your own sentence. There it is, exactly. And I chose yellow. You can choose another color. But my one takeaway was I said, I want lawmakers to know that there are better alternatives to school suspensions, and that makes for a more nurturing environment for students and staff. So I want you to just take a minute and think about whatever issue you're going to be advocating for. And in any setting, what's the one takeaway for this exercise that you want to say, I want you to come away, lawmaker, school board member, principal, whoever, with this nugget? So let's take a minute and do that together and see what we come up with.
Will they all show up on our screen as, okay, very good.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and just like, if you click on that orange, if you started the orange, and then you can type in it. Like if you click right on it, yep, there it is. Did you see how that, I
Yep.
think pink just replaced orange, but yeah, there it is. And then if you type what you're saying on the sticky note, like if you type right there. Perfect. It's a good one. Yeah, no, these are great. These are really great. I think there's one. Let me go in for a second. I can. Perfect. Okay. Before we click on the next slide, is there anything, are we all in, like, we're all good? Does everyone like know how to click in and all that? Okay. So,
Next slide.
okay. So now, okay, so we do that. If you can click to the next slide. Yep, there it is. And then what points from your lived experience did you want to use to support your narrative? So for example, I said, I'm going to share these two examples from one as a high school dean of discipline, one where I was required to use punitive measures and one with restorative practice. So you saw that in the narrative that I used, I was able to support my thesis statement, if you will, with this story. So I want you to take a minute and just think about like the ask you made. And then like, what are a couple of like, what points would you add to your from your lived experience, from your personal story? You can always do a second sticky note if that helps. I know it's hard to like, it has limited, if you don't feel like sticking it on a sticky note, you're welcome to unmute and like say your thought out loud. That works too. Sometimes the sticky notes aren't the right vibe, but if you want to like say it out loud, like this is my thesis statement, this is the point I would use to support it. Oh, that's really tough. Yeah. People seeing you as quirky as opposed to seeing you suffer. That's yeah. And certainly the backup of the family peer advocate not making a living wage and having to drive and all of that. Those are like good ways to like really uplift that experience. So far, so good. Okay, so we've got one more slide. If you don't mind shifting it. And then what is your ask? Before you walk out the door, what do you want? And I'm going to say, I'm going to ask the legislators to co-sponsor and champion the Solutions Not Suspensions Act in the New York legislature. Before I walk out the door, I want to hear that lawmaker say, yep, I'm in. Or sometimes they won't, but that's what I'm going to ask them. Asking lawmakers to provide specific funding for youth mental health first aid training for teachers and administrators. That's awesome. Asking for a cost of living increase so family service agencies and advocates can stabilize the workforce, because that workers, none of this gets done. Absolutely. Yeah, and then perfect. So then essentially what we do is we take these little nuggets and we plug them into the Mad Libs, right? So like, if we don't mind going back to the Mad Libs for a second. So we'll get out of this one. And then this is where we start to say, like, I'm here today. What's the one point you want to make? Right? Like the first part is, here's my name, here's where I live, here's what I do. And then this is the point you want to make, that first slide, right? The second slide is the personal story details. And the third slide is that ask at the end. So if you can think about when you're crafting your story, really just identifying who you are, and then using those 3 different slides to plug into the Mad Libs. And then if you're feeling comfortable and great, you can depart from that as much as you want. But this is just a basic structure to give yourself a starting point. This is just your template, your blueprint that you can then stick to if you're feeling real nervous, or if you're feeling like you've got flow, you can like deviate from and expand on. But this is just a real like simple template that can help keep you on track, especially if you're limited in time. Any questions, anything I can do so far before I turn it back over?
So I don't know if anybody wants to share their stories. Laura, would you like to share yours?
Sure. I'm actually going to follow the template because I find that really helpful, especially like young people just starting out in advocacy don't even really know where to start. So just give me 1 second to pull up that exact template on my end. I have it up. So, hi, I am Laura Romanoff and I live in Coram, New York. I am the Senior Regional Youth Partner for Families Together in New York State, and I am advocating for not only myself, but also other young students in high school and middle school and in starting out in college. I have a great deal of experience navigating the children's mental health system and learning firsthand what it's like to start with zero knowledge. I'm here today because I want better training for our teachers and administrators on youth mental health first aid. When I was in high school, I would have teachers and administrators label my anxiety and my anxious tendencies as quirky or funny, when in reality, I was suffering in almost all of my classes, just because they saw my anxiety being a motivator for me to pass the class. They didn't recognize how emotionally strenuous that pressure I put on myself was. So I am asking of you, the policymakers, to fund sufficient youth mental health first aid training for our teachers and administrators. And thank you for your time.
That was great. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. You're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, I'm still learning too. I'm gonna be honest. So
I didn't see I didn't see any other stories in there. I can also provide an example if we want. Did anybody else want to come forward and unmute yourself if you'd like
Yeah,
to?
I can speak. I didn't write anything.
Okay.
Because it was, I didn't really know which way I was going to go with all this because there's so much to say. But I think the scariest thing for being a mother and never going through the system before and trying to do it all myself is it's like going in the dark, holding your child's hand, trying not to be afraid and not knowing who to ask for help. And I feel like if there was more funding in the school and more like family peer advocates to, because I'm guessing if there was more, they would have offered them. I feel like there was no one to reach out to. Even through the districts of special education, they never even said that there was such people and that anybody could help you. Even though I would always ask for help, they would say, "Oh, you're doing great." And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing great. So I'm not putting it in the statement correctly, but I'm thinking it's more about trying to really wish there was more funding to help parents to navigate the system and not be so afraid. Because when someone's trying to hold your hand and help guide you, you don't have to fake it with your children. I feel like you're trying to fake bravery and because you don't want to let them down, but you really don't know where you're going.
So your ask would be to, what you said was beautiful, and maybe just the concrete ask at the end is
Yeah.
fund peer advocates so that they're more accessible to families like mine.
Yeah.
I wish I had found a peer advocate in the school.
Yes.
My personal experience with peer advocacy was that I found something online, and I live on the east end of Long Island, and I drove almost into Queens thinking that was the only support group that existed. It just so happened I found something online, and then I got there and I was like, you mean there are things like this in my own community? I had no idea.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I feel like even when it comes to school placements or anything else, it's so foreign to those of us who just live in the typical way of going through typical schools and always navigated with what is actually given to you. It's very overwhelming what's out there without actually thinking, why didn't anybody tell me? Even if there was like a friend saying, do you know about this? That's why I always try to tell people, because I feel like nobody knows. But I do want to kind of gear it towards that so that I feel like it would be so helpful. I feel like parents need to join together and we need more people in the system to bring us these awarenesses. So
That's a great ask. I'm 100% behind you on that. So, all right. So, as I mentioned before, you can use this template elsewhere. It's really a practice of identifying in a concise manner, what is it that you want? Because, the experiences that we are navigating that are bringing us to this advocacy work can be so emotional. And emotions don't live in the same place in our brain as words do. And so, in that moment, we want to be helping you to access that word place in your brain so that you can communicate. But the emotions are important. That's where the story comes in. We're conveying an emotion as well. So we're trying to help people kind of bring those two worlds together, emotions and words. So, we just to reiterate, you want to have a sense of what you're asking for before you start the conversation. And if you can articulate that in one sentence, so much the better. Make sure that you understand your audience. Can the person who you're speaking with actually help you? What information do they have and what information do they need in order to help you? And you want to keep it short and fact-based. You provide 2 to 3 statement sentences to support your ask. Use question words to make supporting statements specific. I don't know if you remember learning, the journalism lesson in elementary school: who, what, where, when, how. Those are the words that will help you create specific supporting statements. And by keeping it short, you allow for a give and take, a conversation, which is also going to be more memorable, and it's going to be more emotional, because you'll have the emotion of the exchange, as well as, for your listener, there will be an emotional piece of I'm engaging, I'm not just passively listening, if you allow them to ask some questions as well. And then we ask that no matter the results, you end with a thank you. It leaves you the high road. We can, conversations like these can be frustrating. Our emotions can be heightened, but we always want to end, like I said, with a thank you.
It also gives you the ability to possibly get another meeting. You know what I mean? It's like, you may need to go back and do this again several times. So, don't burn the bridge until there's absolutely nothing left.
Yes, thank you. So we set aside some time for Q&A. If there are any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. Are there any questions on the floor?
Yeah, I think I have one, because when I was reading what we're kind of looking to gain, it seems very specific. If some of the people coming there have their own story and what they're looking for, do you want it to kind of try to fit it into those narratives, or are they allowed to just, say whatever they want to say that they need?
It's a good question. We want people to say whatever their story is that is important to them. Quite frankly, I think it's when you know what the issues are in the system, we can find a way to attach your stories to system-wide issues. So that's not that's the priority, is that it should be your voice and your experience that we're bringing to this. But sometimes people need help in identifying where it is that they want to focus on, and we can do that as well. So that's why I provided information like the legislative priorities from Families Together in New York State and from the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Council. The fact that larger organizations have identified those issues, though, means that, the story that you tell could be repeated elsewhere, which I do think has power to it. When one person shares their experience, that can be, the response can be, oh, that must have been really hard for you. But when, 5 people walk in a room and say, this is what our experience was, then it becomes a system issue. And I do think that policymakers, it becomes more memorable, and policymakers may be more responsive to that issue. But like I said, the stories need to come from the issues that we've identified. Have actually, many of them come from people. I've been on waiting lists. We can relate that to the fact that we aren't, workforce staffing is in a crisis situation throughout New York State. That's why there are wait lists. So we can take people's narratives and we can help link them to those larger issues also.
Okay, so do you think that will happen at the next meeting? Do you want people to kind of already have something like this kind of written out already so that you can see where it ties in?
It would be helpful. at the March webinar, if people just have their statement sentence so that they know what it is, okay, I'm gonna have a couple of minutes to make my point. They have to know what that statement is. And then, yes, we can have a conversation where we help link them to the agenda items as well.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. Those are good questions. So as we said, there is going to be a second meeting on March 14th. It will also be a Zoom. It will happen at 7 o'clock. And it's an opportunity for people to practice their narratives in a supportive environment. And then, as Karen just mentioned, it's also an opportunity for us to connect those personal stories, maybe with larger agenda issues. And we will send an email reminder to all of tonight's attendees. And if you know someone that would like to attend that, even if they have not attended this workshop, they are welcome. So we want to cement the idea of ending with your ask. So each of us has some asks for the audience as well. My first one is get on the bus. I am organizing a bus trip to Albany on March 21st. It is free. We'll provide you with food. We'll provide you with transportation. We will organize visits with your legislators so that you can share your stories with them. The only thing that's missing from this equation is you. So please consider getting on the bus. If you are interested, you should email me, and my email contact is astoltz@liftforkids.org, and it is also at the end of this presentation. My other ask is save the date. LIFT's next legislative breakfast has already been booked. It will be Friday, September 22nd. And this practice that we've done today of beginning to work on your personal narrative, perhaps that's something that you want to expand into a 10-minute presentation at the breakfast, where you share your story and you have your asks there in front of legislators that attend that day. So bookmark September 22nd on your calendar now. And those are my asks. Laura, how about you?
So I actually have two asks. Families Together in New York State is hosting their annual conference on April 30th to May 1st. And we are accepting requests for presentations as well. I can send out the link for anybody who wants to either create a workshop, a discussion panel on anything about children's behavioral health, mental health, any youth serving system as a parent, or if you have young people in your lives that you've connected with, or your kids that are willing and able to present on anything that they feel like they're experts on, regarding their stories, regarding the systems they lived in. It could even be something a little bit more recreational, like something that has helped them cope. So last year, the DEI department at Families Together did a positive affirmation workshop. So the sky is really the limit with that conference. We also have our annual the University of Youth Power, and that is going to be July 22nd. Oh, it's going to be July 22nd to the 24th this year.
I'll edit the slide.
Thank you. And that is our annual youth conference, youth leadership conference run for youth by youth. So youth ages 18 to 30 can come, and this year it's going to be at Siena College up in Albany. And it's a weekend of workshops, networking with other young people that have navigated youth serving systems, We learn together, we grow together, and at the end of the weekend, there's an actual graduation where they earn a certificate of completion for all of the work that they did during the time they spent with us. So it's a great experience. They meet youth across the state, learning what different regions are doing, the different challenges they have, what's similar to what challenges Long Island has. And last year it was amazing, and the young people, including myself, got a lot out of it. So definitely keep that on your radar.
Can I ask you a question regarding that one? Would there be like a bus for that? Because that's kind of far. How would the kids get there?
So we are looking for sponsors and for things like that. Last year we had a bus from New York City. That doesn't mean we couldn't get a bus if we had enough participants from Long Island to take us upstate as well. That is definitely something that I will look into asking for donations for. I know that the Office of Mental Health and even OCFS traditionally have been very interested in this event, so I'm sure that we could find a way.
Okay, and you said on that April 30th to May 1st, what is that one again?
That is the Families Together annual conference.
Okay.
And young people are also welcome to come. There is a separate, what they call youth track. So that'll talk about youth peer workforce challenges and what it's like as a young person navigating any youth serving system. I know that's a lot of vague words, but we really cover all the systems that any youth could kind of live in.
And Karen, with regard to that April event, oftentimes first-time attendees are provided a scholarship that helps cover the cost. We really want to get people to attend that. So we will be providing more information about that as that date comes closer.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Shoshana, do you have an ask?
Sure. Yeah, I would ask that you, since the Solutions Not Suspensions Act is part of the Long Island Families Together and Families Together New York State legislative platform, that you familiarize yourself with that. I'm always happy to answer questions about it. We have the website solutionsnotsuspentionsny.org, and you can always email me. I'll put my email in the chat as well, shershkowitz@citizenactionny.org, because we really do feel that addressing root causes is a better answer than removing kids from school.
So that concludes our presentation. We encourage everyone to keep in touch and of course, stay awesome. Our contact information is here. I don't know if people would like to take a screenshot of it, if if that's something that you'd like to do. We encourage you to come to the Zoom that will happen in March as well, so that we can continue to talk about and shape our narratives. And always feel free to reach out to me. My email and my phone number are there. I go to a lot of meetings, so it's easier to catch me on email. And wherever you are, the whole point of peer advocacy is we are here to support you and answer your questions to the best of our ability and bring you aboard. So don't be shy about reaching out. And I want to thank Laura and Shoshana tonight for their time. I hope that everyone found this helpful, and hope to see you in March. So thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.